I'm Emily and Lou. I'm the general counsel at Calvert Impact. We are a nonprofit 501c3 impact investing organization. We've been around for about 30 years. We raise money originally through something called the Community Investment Note, which is a retail product available in all 50 states for $20. You can buy a note, and that note promises you a financial return as well as an impact return. We are here today because in 2024, we launched something called the Cut Carbon Note.
It's into something because this has been with us for almost a month now, so I don't want to go back to them at this point and say just easily gets it done. Because that makes sense.
Samantha, Biggio, the line. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sorry. So we launched something called the Cut Carbon Notes, which is a really fascinating product. It's similar to the Community Investment Note, and I'll let Jerry and Charlie speak a little bit more about it, but it's actually a rated product, and it's an asset-backed security. But again, it's a product for impact. Calvert Impact also does a number of other things, including MDBF, which is Mission Driven Bank Fund. So it's a private fund that aims to reduce the racial wealth gap by investing in CDFIs and MDIs. And most recently, we've been selected as the prime recipient of close to $7 billion under the National Clean Investment Fund under EPA to invest in clean energy across the U.S.
Great. And let's now turn to Jerry.
Thanks, Sophia. Excuse my voice. I'm coming through the end of the bug that's going around my little town here, so I'll try and keep it together as long as I can. And Emily, and apologies for, oh, you got your name fixed. Thank goodness. That was rough for you. Anyway, my name is Jerry Parker. I'm senior counsel at Morgan, Lewis & Bockius. We're an AmLaw 20 big law firm, and we were outside counsel to Calvert for the Cut Carbon Notes. And so I, along with Charlie Sweet, helped run the outside counsel portion of the project. And we had a great team at Calvert to work with, and also a great team at Morgan Lewis supporting us. And so, as Emmeline said, the Cut Carbon Note is a pretty unique product. It is essentially at its core an asset-backed security product. But it is investment grade, a rated security that's available to retail investors. And so particularly the publicly available nature of it and the kind of scalability of the program that we've seen already sets it apart from some of the other products available in the impact space.
Great, thank you so much. And now let's turn to Steve. Steve and Cynthia worked on the 2022 winning prize project.
Thanks. So Steve Valdez-Robles, currently general counsel at Water Equity, which is an impact investment firm focused on access to water and sanitation. But I'm here because I was at the Nature Conservancy, which is one of the largest environmental nonprofits in the world. And while there, I worked with the NatureVest team in doing impact investment transactions, including a modernization of debt for nature swaps, where we work with sovereigns who are looking to swap their existing debt for better terms, better tenure, debt forgiveness, or a range or mix of those. In exchange, they will do some environmental commitments as well.
Yeah.
Great. Hi, I'm Cynthia Erdicassis. I'm a partner at A&O Sherman. Although, like Steve, when we were doing the Belize transaction, that was when I was at Sherman and Sterling, which has since merged with Allen and Overy, creating A&O Sherman. And I practice in what we call the ENRI group, which is Energy, Natural Resources, and Infrastructure. Essentially, I'm a project finance lawyer. And so I used my skills in working with Steve, such as they are, on the blue bond transaction for Belize, which is an interesting one, kind of like Jerry mentioned. It does use techniques, structured finance techniques, which are used in the securitization kind of area. And it combined structured finance, project finance, sovereign debt restructuring, distressed debt trading transactions. And it took elements of all of those, as well as the historical debt for nature swap product, and combined them all together and kind of multiplied it by quite a number to create these sort of mega debt for conservation financing transactions that we did in Belize, and we've done a few more of, and hopefully we'll do many more.
Hi, I'm Zvia. I hope you don't mind if I introduce myself too.
I'm so sorry. I wasn't sure if you were speaking on this call, so we will bring you up as a presenter.
Oh, okay. I think I'm there.
Okay, good. I can't see your face, but yeah, then we're
Okay.
good.
Well, I can see my face. So
Okay, good. Oh, now I can see you. Beautiful.
I'm Charlie Sweet. I'm a partner at Morgan Lewis. I work very closely with Jerry, and worked also on the cut carbon program. I think, I spent about a year talking with Emily and her crew before Jerry came on board to start sort of putting the deal together, just trying to figure out how to structure it, given the dispersed desires of Calvert and the various types of legal issues we were dealing with, to try to create something that was very new. As Cynthia mentioned, right, these types of deals, in both of our experience, start as kind of one thing, but they turn into an amalgamation of a lot of different things as you try to weave your way through what the client wants, what the market needs are, what the legal ramifications are, what you can and can't do, haven't done before. And having a big, honestly, having a big firm like A&O Sherman or like Morgan Lewis sort of on the other side with a lot of resources to call on in a lot of different areas turns out to be super helpful, because it never ends up exactly in kind of the narrow area in which you think you're starting.
It was a great lead into the question I was going to ask, which is to really dig a little deeper into the nature of each of these roles. Like, how would you describe, the role of in-house counsel and the role of external counsel? What are the distinguishing aspects? And I guess the breadth, obviously, of a big firm, that's one piece, but what other pieces are there? And how do the two roles work to complement each other? So we can start with either project. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I'll start since no one else seems to want to, and then turn it over maybe to Emily for her view. I mean, I think, in-house counsel, his job is to talk to the business folks and to sort of start translating what is this business idea into, identifying legal issues, identifying who might be best, suited outside to serve. And then sort of bring in outside counsel, who then is tasked with figuring out the details of all of this and asking questions and poking and prodding, going to point A, point B, point C. But I think, while outside counsel in our deal at least did a lot of the legwork in terms of trying to figure out how to do it, in-house counsel served as sort of the bridge between outside counsel and the business folks, but also poking and prodding herself, right? Are you sure about that? Did you think about this? Did you go talk to these folks? Well, we did this in another deal. Can we translate that? So I think it ends up being a very sort of, at least in our experience, a very synergistic and interactive experience.
Yeah, and sorry, Emily, I'll just jump in real fast. And Emily has, commands a vast knowledge of Calvert and it's kind of the deals that it's done and what has worked organizationally, kind of on an enterprise level, and had a real clear sense of, from her business team, what we were trying to accomplish here in that context. And so having that information to pass to us and act as both the go-between for the business team, but also as the person who knows the client the best, so we can best understand the client's needs and how to execute them, on a transactional and legal level. That's another sort of synergy between the two teams. Sorry, Emily, I'll pass it to you.
No, I think that the role of in-house counsel, right, is to very much understand the product, understand what are your goals and what are your limitations. And in a situation like this, I will say that at an impact shop, and I'm curious, Steve, if you agree, right? The role of in-house counsel is also to say, I don't actually want external counsel to bring me what you bring all your other clients. I want you to bring me the world of possibilities, and simply because no one has done this does not mean we should not go in this direction, right? I want to know what is legally possible as opposed to what is most common. And I think that's an important distinction. And I also think that the other thing that I suspect both of us have with our external counsels, and I have with actually all of the external counsels here, is a longstanding relationship that predates this particular product. Morgan Lewis has served as pro bono counsel for us on our portfolio for many, many years, allowing them to really understand our business. Cynthia's also served as our pro bono counsel from time to time, and helping us again, kind of like develop templates and things like that, which really gives external counsel a much better insight into the business rationale and the impact rationale of the organization, which I think really helps them to come up with structures and come up with kind of what is possible, and really helped us to prioritize impact within the product.
And Emily, and I want to build on what you said about, yes, I completely agree. It's what's possible. And then the magic of the firm that, Cynthia and her colleagues did was turning something that was not known in the market into something that looked close enough to something in the market that people were not freaked out and unwilling to buy it, which when you are doing these new things, there is a real inertia in the market. People are afraid of new things. And so all changes to the market need to look incremental, even if it's a drastic sea change. And so Cynthia was just, phenomenal in helping us sort of, it was a new relationship. So unlike you, where you had this existing relationship, we hadn't done any of this stuff before, other than in the pure nonprofit world. And so one of my tasks was to find a firm who, not just had the breadth, but with sovereign debt. And so, there are only a handful of firms who really understand sovereign debt. And so it was a new relationship, and it's now bloomed into a multi-deal, long-term relationship. But finding that fit, I talked to several different firms, and I talked to several different people who did that. And I happen to know one of Cynthia's partners, Antonia Stolper, from way back when. Having those conversations really helped us arrive at, this is the firm that's, able to do this, that has the expertise and can work that magic.
Thank you, Steve. That's really kind of you. But I agree with what everybody said. And I think each transaction you work on or at least that I've worked on the pro bono side, sort of the relationship and the sort of role of inside and outside counsel it can be different, right? It sort of has to match the needs of the particular transaction. And absolutely in this, the Belize deal was basically scaling up substantially to a real commercial level, a pilot that Steve and others at TNC had worked on a couple of years before in the Seychelles. And so it was really taking that experience, figuring out how to scale it up and hopefully make it something that could be replicated for others. And also, learning the lessons that they learned from doing Seychelles, and refining the product, right? So it was we were very much, learning from Steve, who was in the pilot seat, both on the, I have to say, both on the legal side and a lot on the business side too. You were pretty heavily involved, Steve, on the business side of it, and you were both a bridge and sort of had your feet on both sides of that divide. But for that particular deal, it was very much, it was a very iterative process as we you know, as we figured out, well, we knew ultimately what we wanted to do, but how to get from where we were to there, you know, there were some detours along the way, some ideas that we tried that we decided, you know, no, we're going to double back a little bit. That first deal took us a little longer than we had all anticipated, but it was very much as Charles mentioned, it was picking from all different parts of our firm. I mean, we had people from, I don't know, Steve, 7, 8, 9 different practice groups at our firm involved. You know, we had people who did this, Antonia and her team on the sovereign debt side. We had Bjorn, one of my colleagues, Bjorn, who does structured finance, and we had to do, you know, with all the rating agencies and creating trusts and other things. We had other people on the tax side. We had disputes people. We had people who could do sanctions because, you know, there were some, you know, in Latin America, what was, you know, what countries were involved, who owned what parts of this debt and everything else. We brought in everybody across the firm. And that's why I think like firms like we have on the call today and are important for a number of these transactions, because you do have to be able to draw from all different expertises that you have.
And let me ask a question to the law firm side here, to Cynthia, Jerry, and Charlie. So when you're evaluating this potential new client, how do you make that evaluation? Because it sounds like it's a pretty broad range of other folks that you're going to be bringing in. You may not know initially what it's going to look like. So what questions do you ask? What conversations do you have before you make these decisions to enter into that relationship?
Jerry, do you want to go first?
You know, I'll distinguish, I think, between your project with Steve and his team and our project. And, you know, we have, you know, our firm has, as Emily said, a longstanding relationship with Calvert and have been working.
Yeah, there was no question we were going to do this deal. Right.
And so, so when, you know, Emmeline came to a different lawyer at our firm, the one that she works with, kind of had worked with primarily, I bet the numbers on that have been skewed by the last 3 or 4 years. But you know, that lawyer came to us, came to Charlie, because, you know, in the group that we work in the structured transactions group, we have the expertise that it was going to take to take the idea that Emmeline and her business team presented to our colleague Patty Brennan, and kind of turn that into the ABS product that it ended up being. And, you know, as a firm, we know that we can bring to bear the expertise in the specialty areas that that we needed to touch on, which, you know, as Cynthia went through the laundry list of what they went through, you know, it's about the same for us. You know, we had 40 Act lawyers, we have tax lawyers, we have ERISA lawyers, we have securities litigators. You know, there's it takes a huge team and a kind of vast variety of expertise to put together transactions kind of as complex and multi-layered as these ones are.
And there were a lot of go and no go, I think, decision points for Calvert, right? I mean, you know, when you're faced with a project that you've never done before and you can think of multiple ways of doing it, every time you come to a decision point, there's a question of, well, how long will this take? Is it really feasible? Will the markets accept it? How much will it cost? Is it replicable? Can we do it more than once? All these types of considerations. And so I think there were a lot of those decision points for Calvert along the way. It wasn't just a matter of saying, identifying the lawyers who could help them get from point A to point Z. It was at B, C, D, E, F, G, H, every point along the way. Is there something better, and or is this something that's worth continuing to pursue?
And Emmeline and Steve, from your perspective, or Cynthia, did you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to say for us on taking on these kinds of matters, there's sort of 2 different pieces of it. One is that we have this fantastic lawyer, Sarah Lynn Cohen, who heads our pro bono practice, and she really manages a lot of the requests we have that come in, and actually there are other parts of the firm and other parts of TNC that we had done a fair amount of work with in the past, very different area. But there's sort of that piece of it, which makes sure that the client making the request fits within the criteria of pro bono, right? That it is a not-for-profit. And then you have to have lawyers within the firm who are interested and excited about doing the particular project. And Sarah Lynn knows our firm inside and out, so she knows when something like what Steve brought us came in, that she should call Antonia and she should call me because of the sovereign debt side of it and the conservation side of it. So it's usually it's that combination of a client that fits the requirements and a transaction, which is something, we have sort of certain areas where there are definitely particular, there are groups of people who are really interested in, and conservation, greening, all kinds of transactions in that area, as well as microfinance organizations and social impact investing financing organizations are, like Calvert, are definitely fall in that space.
That makes sense. From your perspective, what can you add about how you are approaching these relationships? Because you have your organization's missions and objectives. Maybe you want to make something that's replicable. So you have, something that you're looking to build. So how are you conveying this to the external counsel to make sure that you're working toward your objectives?
I think that kind of at the beginning of the relationship, right, we tend to set forward what our objectives are, right? So our objectives were, right, we really believe in democratization of access to impact. We really needed something that was able to be publicly discussed, which for a security is difficult. We really needed something that was replicable and scalable, right? So we brought all of three of those, and we actually developed a giant grid of what securities assumption gets you what, right? And what's the cost of that? So that is something that we were very kind of upfront with, and then kind of overlaying all of that is mission, right? Mission is both democratization of finance, but also making sure that mission is built into the product, right? This is a green bond, this complies with the impact principles, right? And so we have a very specific theory of change. For us, this I think is really nice because our product itself embeds impact. But kind of, those are the factors that we go out to counsel with, and we make sure that at each and every stage when we're evaluating if it's a no or no-go, that we keep in mind, right, first principles of whether or not this is impact, it's scalable, it's kind of feasible.
I both in my former job and current job, I work with a lot of firms that don't do impact, or it's nascent in the firm. And I think how I approach those firms is very different than how I approach firms that are quite familiar with it. And so the role as an in-house counsel also changes. Sometimes firms that want to move into this space but have not before are very keen to work with a nonprofit doing an impact, because then they can build their own sort of capacity. So it's a learning experience for them. And in those cases, they're getting and talking to some of our technical people, or with Belize, I was serving as a bridge on marine spatial planning, which is all the science. I had hours and hours of conversations with these marine scientists. And then I would come and sit with the Sherman team and say, okay, here's what we're doing, and here's how we're trying to translate it, and would work through those things. And just no one in the world had ever done that in the type of legal agreement before. And so, it didn't matter how much experience Cynthia had with impact. We were just trying to figure out, this is just, what is that? How does this work? And I think that goes to what, Emmeline was saying earlier in the conversation about that openness to say, okay, it's not been done, let's figure it out.
Great. That makes sense. We're going to turn to a question in the chat from Deborah. She's asking if we can hear more about how firms handle pro bono practice versus billable practice in the impact space. Is it just a binary decision, like if a client is a nonprofit, or is there room for firms to provide pro bono or low bono services for for-profits that are mission focused and resource constrained?
Money question's my favorite. I'll jump in. I mean, I think at big firms, right, for the most part, you know, at least our firm, pro bono is an intrinsic part of who we are and what we do. And we have a pro bono hour requirement for every single lawyer in our firm. And that pro bono requirement is met 100% through the more than 2,000 lawyers around the world. You know, and we have a fantastic pro bono team with pro bono coordinators who sort of help to uncover projects, help to match people with the right projects, et cetera. And I think Calvert has been both a pro bono and a paying client for us. They've been both. And I think this deal was actually a little bit of both. So a little bit of pro bono, but it was also, you know, paid work for us to be able to get the deal done. So, I mean, I think, you know, firms are going to approach it very differently, depending upon what their own internal views about pro bono, I think, are. But from my perspective, I mean, you know, if you're a lawyer and you're at a firm and you're looking at a project like one of these that we're talking about here today, you can think about it with multiple hats on, right? You can think about it in terms of what good I'm doing for the world, but you can also think about it in terms of, you know, am I helping this client grow so that they will be a profitable client for us in the future as they become more profitable? And is it something that I can turn around? Am I going to be developing expertise that will help me sell my time and my expertise to other clients as well? So I think it's a balancing act with a lot of factors. Cynthia, I don't know how you guys deal with it.
No, I agree with everything you said. It's really, and at our firm, it's not something that necessarily any individual, you know, lawyer or partner, it's not a decision they make alone. Really, Sarah Lynn and our pro bono coordinators are kind of in the middle of all of this. For the most part, right? If something is pro bono, it is for a not-for-profit organization. And you know, if a pro bono client pays for legal services, pays others for legal services, I mean, it has to be looked at very, very carefully. I mean, you pay for legal services for something, you know, for like tax-exempt tax advice for NGOs. That's, you know, if it's a highly specialized area or it's local counsel in an emerging market, right? That's one thing. But if paying for sort of regular order legal services and paying, you know, other firms like the firms here, that would be an issue for us. Now, that's not to say that, as you said, Charles, we wouldn't take on matters for clients on a, you know, deep discount basis or, you know, on a, because we thought and we were able to, you know, talk through with the firm pro bono management as a whole, that the particular transaction was one, because as I should say, we have pro bono, and then we have a separate, which is sort of social impact kind of category. And so pro bono is for, you know, no charge. Social impact would be sort of where we would turn to if we were looking for something that we thought was a really good thing to do. It was a positive thing to do, you know, socially. And the client was not in a position to pay, you know, for our fees on a usual basis. And so we were going to, you know, do it on a different fee arrangement. And part of that could be that what they want to do, we thought is a great cause. It could also be combined with the idea, as Charles said, that you're developing a product, which, you know, later on other clients who are full paying clients might start to use, right? Or you know, there's any number of reasons why that you can, you know, combine together to put together the rationale for going forward with the project on an alternate basis.
That leads nicely into another question Deborah dropped in, is how much more financially viable were these transactions because of pro bono contributions of, the law firm?
I'm going to jump on this one, Emily, and say we couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, if we did, we already had so many resources dedicated doing this deal. And I don't know how much Sherman would have cost, but I'm just going to say it was probably millions of dollars because it was so many issues. And it took, as and Cynthia said, over a year because things kept changing and we kept having to adapt and we kept having to call in another partner. And, everyone on this call knows how much those partners' times are worth. And when you're having hour-long calls every week with like 4 partners with specialty expertises to work through really sticky issues on something that no one's ever done before, it just wouldn't have worked. Just really would not have worked without pro bono. Now, the goal maybe in a few years when we want to replicate this, we want to see these things happen. If there becomes a standard out there, then maybe these do become transactions that are affordable for anyone to do with paid counsel. But for that first one, that would have been impossible.
I think for us, right, like this product was actually incubated inside of Calvert Impact Capital. So Morgan Lewis was pro bono counsel when we started originating the assets, when we first started lending to them and understanding them. And so without that understanding, this product could not have been built. I think I can say this, Morgan Lewis did this on a fixed fee basis for us. And so without that, right, I think it would have been really challenging, right? Like, I think it's never sexy to fund plumbing. And as a nonprofit, right, you don't have much of a budget to fund really complex, new, interesting ideas, right? Certainly not in your first deal. And so, to the extent that there wasn't, the learning from the pro bono work that Morgan Lewis did for us on the transactional side in building the warehouse, I'm not sure this product would have been possible. And I suspect that transaction costs are a reason that a number of products are not built in other organizations. That exploration and that kind of going down multiple dead ends is very costly, and on kind of a full fee basis is prohibitive in many aspects.
We have another question from the chat. In-house counsel understands the risk appetite of their organization and makes legal risk judgments. So could the two of you, Emmeline and Steve, share some examples in your transactions where those types of judgments were made?
My counsel's on the line, so I don't know if I can. Right, because there are situations, right? Like so there are, be thoughtful here. There are ways that you can sell securities, right? So when you're going to market, one really good example here is when you're going to market, you might go to market, realize something doesn't sell, and then take it back and go again. That always gives you the risk that those initial investors that you've gone out to may believe a certain thing. I'm watching Charlie's face really carefully here, right? And when you take it back, they might hold you to that original thing, right? And we're selling to retail investors here. And so we definitely had kind of what I'll call false starts, and in the program, right, in which we went out with something, we're like, oh, that doesn't work. We need to take it back and change it. And a securities lawyer will tell you that's risky because unless you're really clear in dealing with a really sophisticated investor, there's confusion in the market, right? So that's a legal risk. That's a risk that we evaluated, and we said we think that it's we have to do it because like this, we didn't quite sell what we needed to in this ABS offering. And 2, we're working with people we know really, really well. So that risk is significantly mitigated and they're very sophisticated. But we deal with things like this consistently. I'll stop.
So our goal is for this program to be replicable, and I think at this point it's been over $1 billion of debt that's been restructured across the different deals. And as big as the Nature Conservancy is, it cannot take on $1 billion of exposure. And so one of the things that Chairman and we really worked on is, we're not going to have no risk because we're front and center in these transactions, but how in the world can we, wall off the Nature Conservancy from that exposure? And so, it was really a lot of thought and effort and, again, to go back to the pro bono, if I had to worry about, the clock running every time I picked up the phone and spoke to someone at Shearman, it would have been a real problem, because that's how we mitigated risk too. Because if I could have, multiple calls with them and just, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? What's our exposure here? How do we protect ourselves from that? Cynthia mentioned, trusts lawyers, because we use trusts and they're great for protection, right? And that ability to interact with outside counsel to find these structures that could protect us so that we don't have that exposure was just really critical, and sort of balancing the risk of doing this, which has huge impact and huge amounts of money that go into conservation, without having a huge exposure.
And can I just add one thing from the law firm perspective there, right? I think this goes back to having a diversified platform with national experts in a lot of areas, right? You don't want to have somebody who's not an expert in a field spinning their wheels, because that's turned something that's very time consuming and costly into something that's ridiculously time consuming and costly. For the most part, while you're inventing, a lot of your invention is like pulling together strands from different things that already exist, and then only inventing what you absolutely have to get to the end product, because that's the most efficient. That's also the most efficient way to do it, and that's how you manage costs internally for yourself if you're doing it purely pro bono, or manage costs for the client if they're full pay or partial pay.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, see, I was just going to add that, and to Steve's point, as we pulled those strands together and we sort of looked at the potential exposures or consequences, or how it affected the rest of the transaction or future transactions. I mean, we really did, at the end of the day, when it came to the definitive documents, we had a whole group of associates who were helping to document and everything else. But in that structuring phase, which for our transaction lasted a long time, months and months and months, you did have to bring in the partners, because it was a lot of this question of, well, we're going to take this idea, this structure that everybody uses here, and we're going to modify it to use it here, which means we're going to change X and Y. If we change X and Y, what does that mean? X and Y were there for a reason. They were structured that way for a reason originally. If we modify that, when you pull on this, what's the consequence? And is that okay? Is that acceptable? Or is there another better way to do it? And, really sort of cutting to the chase with people who work with those products all the time, some of whom, were on the ground floor when those products were being structured. It was the most efficient way to basically take something and tinker with it and pull pieces out of it, pull it apart, bring pieces from one, amalgamate a bunch of things, mash them up together. And so I agreed that was the most efficient way to do it. People who deal with it all the time and who know.
Yeah, absolutely. I second all of that, right? Like you bring in like the top fields and the top experts in your firm to think creatively about using this in a different context, right? Our structure had for the risk retention piece in the securitization, had a recoverable grant structure, which is really unusual and really interesting, and required a lot of creative tax work in conjunction with risk retention analysis from the securitization team. And that would have only happened with, experts in their field who were incredibly comfortable with the law and were willing to be a little bit creative with it because they were such experts.
And also who could talk. I remember, Steve, a couple times the investment, as you said, there's a kind of inertia in the market and people don't like to change. They like to, they're comfortable with what they're doing, and getting some of the investment bankers on the line who are going to be selling these bonds or restructuring it. And, you know, when they talk to the people who they're usually dealing with on their, you know, ordinary course transactions, and being able to explain to them that, no, it's okay. I know this isn't how you usually do it. I know you usually think about it this way, but it's okay. And this is why it's okay, right? That there's an ability to have that dialogue, and for the, you know, the counterparties you're talking to, whatever, you know, role they may be playing, to be open to that discussion, right? And they're not sort of, oh my goodness, how am I going to explain this internally? Can't do that.
Thanks for all of those thoughts. I was going to ask you, all of you, this is for everybody on this panel, is how front and center was replicability and scalability? I mean, not every client has that as one of their objectives. So how did that play into all of these choices that you were making, and as well as how far to stray from what's been done in the past and what people are comfortable with?
For us, it's always top of mind. We don't do products that aren't scalable and aren't replicable. They're too difficult and too expensive, and they don't really, right? We see success in terms of impact as moving the market. If something is not scalable and replicable, it does not move the market. There are such big problems in our world that we need something that can scale and can replicate.
Great. So let's turn to the Grunin Prize. It's all of you won the Grunin Prize. So what thoughts do you have for folks who are interested in either doing this type of work or submitting projects they've worked on? What pieces do you think are common to kind of most or all of the folks who have won in the past or are candidates or could have won? Pull out some key themes maybe for the audience.
Well, I can kick it off. We've already talked a lot about replicability and scalability. Like it's got to be something that has the potential to make a pretty big impact in the space. And I think innovation plays a big role. Both the Cut Carbon project and also Steve and Cynthia's project, these are, some of the features are going to look like stuff that's been done before, but as a sort of amalgamated product, these are both truly innovative structures and products. And I think that played a big role, at least in our project, certainly.
Yeah, I think that I would just say for us, the prize application process was pretty smooth, because as we looked at what the criteria for the award are, we all sort of said, aha, this sounds exactly like what we did. So, I mean, I think I tend to think that if you're doing impact work, you know, the work is going to drive whether or not you're well suited to apply for an honor such as this one, right? It's not going to be something where you pick a project, obviously, to sort of ride down so that you hope you'll win this award and get all this great publicity and be able to be on webinars and talk to people about what you've done. But I think it's also important, but it is important, I think, to pay attention to that application process. I mean, I think we went through a lot of different drafts of the application with input from in-house at Morgan Lewis, from our folks who we have folks who actually work on prizes for a lot of their time, and they helped us sort of package it in a way that would be helpful. And and then input from the client and input from the lawyers and the people who want to say things, and you have to say, no, that's not quite right. I'd love to be able to say that, but we got to be able to say what the reality is. So I think if the project's right, the application will find its way. But work on the application. It takes a lot of work too to position yourself appropriately.
I would say a good test of a project that I think would be good for the prize is one that you want to share, right? Like, you've got a problem and you found a solution. You're like, oh, this worked for me. This was really hard to find. I want to tell everybody about it because I think this is a great structure that no one's thought about in this way that could really move markets, right? So it's something that you don't want to keep to yourself. It's something that you're like, I want this platform so I can tell everybody, like, securitization, securitize impact assets, like do like this cool thing, like go out and like, bring capital into this market that's really hard to fund. So I would say that's a really good test. Like if you're excited about it and you're like, I wish more people were doing this, that's a great reason to apply for the prize.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, please.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say, I agree with the point that, we don't pick our projects on the basis that, oh, this is gonna be a great application for the Grunin Prize, 100%. But I think it's, when we looked at it for the Belize deal, we thought two things. One is, when TNC developed this idea and this need for a solution, it basically, first of all, there was a challenge, right? There was something there was a challenge they were trying to address, which was, oceans are so important for climate change and mitigating climate change, and nobody's funding anything relating to oceans. It's the biggest impact, and yet it seems to be nobody's paying attention to it. Hardly any, if you looked at where money is going to address, carbon emissions and all of that, almost none of it was going into oceans. And so number one was there was a major challenge on something that had a huge impact that was trying to be addressed. And then they came up with an approach and a solution, which was something that actually not only addressed that, but also addressed other issues, developmental issues, sort of financial issues for countries and other things. So it was a combination of how important the issue was that they were trying to address, how they came up with a solution that addressed not only that, but other things, and a solution that, as you said, Emmeline, it was replicable. It could be used not only by Belize, but hopefully by a number of other, jurisdictions with the same kind of profile, at least sort of the same profile.
I would just add ripeness. The Seychelles would not have been a good candidate. It was a pilot, it was small, there was no commercial capital. It was just sort of testing the waters that, okay, how would we do that? What would this look like? It wasn't proof of anything that could grow, whereas Belize was that proof. And so I think there's an element there too of when is the right time to submit something.
Great. So we have just 2 minutes left. I would love for you guys to go around and give closing thoughts. Emmeline, you mentioned moving markets. Like part of, the most important piece of what we're talking about is moving markets, is shifting perspectives and shifting how these transactions work. So if you want to go around and just give your closing thoughts on, this work, on the role that in-house and external counsel play, and anything else you have. Emmeline, I'll just start with you since I already said your name.
So it should be a deal that you're really excited about. I love this prize because I think that so much of this work goes unseen, right? Everyone is looking at kind of the big shiny like product, right? But I think this is a wonderful prize to highlight all of the hours and work and time and heartache that went into building that product. So I love this to like kind of, lift up kind of the people really doing the work in the trenches.
Charlie, you're off mute, or Jerry.
Sure. I think if you're a lawyer in a big firm and you're listening to this and you're interested in getting into impact investing, keep your eyes open and your ears open, right? Be talking to your pro bono coordinators, be talking to your partners, because whatever the next new project is that's going to be important from an impact perspective may not be presented in that way even to you within the firm. And you may have to dig a little to find that opportunity, but when you do, it's really going to be rewarding.
Similar to that, this is kind of new, exciting, really interesting and challenging work that tends to kind of break the bounds of traditional practice areas. And so there's a lot of opportunity for interdisciplinary work. And it's a great opportunity to, for firm lawyers, for in-house lawyers, for, really everyone working on these projects to grow in a professional capacity and really do some pretty exciting stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
Steve, Cynthia?
Well, what I would say is I think I don't know, the Belize transaction for me it's just further proof that some of the most complicated deals I've done have been in the social impact space and this space. This was as complicated and required as many resources across the firm to achieve the solution. And the sophistication of the client was as sophisticated as any regular paying client would be. In fact, even more, because and we were lucky because Steve was in the middle and we were talking to the scientists and able to get even further into that side of the transaction, the quote business side of the transaction. And so these are in addition to being, I think, enormously satisfying because of what you hopefully achieve with the transaction. Professionally, the challenge of it, the intellectual challenge of it is amazing.
Steve, would you like to wrap?
Sure. I'll end with a plug for the Grunin conference. I think a big part of what everyone is echoing, right, is it's innovation, it's thought. And, very rarely does something come out of thin air. You're taking an idea that exists and innovating. And one of the things that I really value about the Grunin Center, the prize, the conference, is it's a forum to see how people are innovating and take away ideas. Every year I've gone, I've come away with ideas. And do they always come to fruition? No. But could they? Absolutely. And when they do, that's just the huge value of this.
Thank you for that. And I'll also say that one thing, a common theme I heard from all of you is that these relationships over many months or many years are what help, both sides, in-house and external counsel, understand each other, understand the goals, understand what's important. And so having these conversations year after year at the Grunin conference or in these types of settings, I think builds that muscle memory so that these deals can happen when they're ripe. So come build relationships. I think that's what happens over those 2 days. And throughout the year, hopefully. But thank you, panelists, for taking a full hour out of your day. We're really grateful that you chose to spend it with us. We're going to be posting this on our YouTube channel. We'll send it out to our email list. So for anyone who's not on that list, I can add you. And this will be up on our website. So hopefully many more people will be able to see it. So thank you. And have a great rest of your day.